Countries are like people. Some are boisterous, extravagant, showy. Others present a calm, quiet and restful exterior. But if it's spectacle, extravagance and drama you enjoy, then Scotland performs well on the world stage. Consider this: a mountainous landscape that soars skyward and dives down towards a coastline spattered with towering, wind-lashed islands. Cities and towns that declaim a decorous history and a vibrant, contemporary culture. Scotland boasts a strong allegiance to science, the arts, engineering, invention. And of course, its celebrated literature is often accompanied by an equally celebrated drink. Yes, if it's spectacle and drama you enjoy, then Scotland offers a vibrant, thoughtful and inspirational culture. And when it comes to the natural world, this small country offers many surprises. The Scottish Highland region is one of Europe's most spectacular landscapes. Its gloomy glens, towering mountains, and a seemingly unending wilderness combine to present a lowering landscape that is ripe for poetic invention and unbounded imagination. No wonder the written and spoken literature of the country abounds with tales of kelpies, those shape-shifting water spirits, and the devilish Eich Uisce, that mischievous Highland water horse. Such mythological characters continue to populate an imaginary world and fulfill their far from playful potential in the imagination of today's storytellers. Animals, too, highlight Scotland's uniqueness within the natural realm of the four countries of the British Isles. Seals, porpoises and dolphins patrol their inshore domain, while sea eagles and golden eagles soar over land and sea. Rivers are fish-rich and are often home to otters and even beavers. On land, red deer and the elusive capercaillie and pine marten tempt the talents of filmmakers and photographers from around the world. And much to the surprise of many, the Cairngorm region has a substantial herd of reindeer. But there is one intriguing animal that has secured its home in this northern kingdom, an animal that is little known, seldom seen, and rarely filmed or photographed. Indeed, this animal is almost as fictional as the kelpie and its mysterious companions. It is the Scottish wildcat. This secretive, seldom-spotted carnivore is related, at some distance it should be said, to other big cats of the world. There was once a time when the wildcat thrived throughout the whole of mainland Britain. However, that time is long since, and its territory is now severely limited to a selection of regions, such as the Cairngorms at the far north of Scotland. Given that the wildcat's build is akin to that of a large tabby cat, to the inexperienced eye, domestic cats and wildcats are almost indistinguishable. However, there are key identifying traits that help distinguish between the two. The wildcat's diet is like that of any carnivore, and thus it is highly predictable. Rabbits, mice, and other small mammals are its usual quarry. Their habitat is a predictable mix of bare moorland and thick woodlands where the heather, gorse and undergrowth provide substantial cover. As with any creature, an abundant food source is key to their survival. Wildcats are both solitary and rare, so population estimates vary wildly. Indeed, when it comes to assessing the current number of the Scottish wildcat, no exact figure can be given. 10 years ago, it was established opinion that around 400 wildcats remained. During the making of this film, it became evident that under 100 wildcats are alive in Scotland today. Naturally, opinions vary and disputes on this sensitive issue can be heated. But whatever the accuracy of these assumed or actual figures, the fact remains that despite being fully protected by law, the Scottish wildcat is in danger of disappearing completely, possibly within the next 5 years. It would not be amiss or alarmist to claim that this iconic animal is teetering on the edge of extinction. Whilst wildcats and domestic cats look somewhat alike, there are several visual differences between the two. For example, the wildcat has a more muscular build, and its face and jaw are heavy set compared to a domestic cat. When it comes to spotting the wildcat with the naked eye, or with binoculars, or capturing it on camera, it is this animal's own reticence and introversion that add to the extreme difficulty of photographing its everyday life in the Highlands. However, there are 6 identified regions in Scotland known to be inhabited by wildcats. These are being targeted as zones for research and conservation. They are known as priority areas, and they include Morven, Strathpeffer, Northern Strathspey, Strathaven, Strathbogie, and the Angus Glens. So just how did an animal related to the world's exotic big cats, such as lions and leopards, end up in the far north of Britain? The Scottish wildcat is a descendant of European wildcat ancestors that colonized mainland Britain between 7,000 to 9,000 years ago. Thanks to its remarkable hunting skills, it thrived throughout the British Isles in what were then heavily forested regions that provided ample food and shelter. But by the early 1800s, the wildcat had disappeared from much of southern Britain, due mainly to deforestation and persecution. Gradually, by the late 19th century, the wildcat's territory had been further reduced to the remaining forests and moorlands of Scotland. In 1840, a gamekeeper's ledger was published from the Glengarry estate. Within this ledger, it contained the numbers of predators and vermin killed in the previous 4 years. There were 198 wildcats in this ledger, more than double the amount thought to exist today. Today, you would have to travel to the Cairngorms region and points further north, the wildcat's last outposts, to search for the slightest trace of this striking animal. And even then, there would be no guarantee that you would catch even a fleeting glance of the elusive wildcat. As societies begin to better understand the benefits of conservation and the safeguarding of species, the exchange of information and good practice can assist in preserving endangered animals. Take, for instance, the successful reintroduction of the Iberian lynx in Spain and Portugal. In 2002, there were approximately 100 lynxes in the southern regions of those countries, a number that included just 25 breeding females. Today, there are over 400. Such reintroductions have been hailed as solid successes, resulting in applications for licenses to reintroduce the Eurasian lynx in the United Kingdom. Of all the reintroductions of the lynx species that have already taken place in European countries, most have proved hugely successful in both wildlife and public opinion terms. Such successes give us cause for optimism in the efforts to save the Scottish wildcat. The question remains, why is it that the wildcat is so hard to find, so tricky to film, and so infuriatingly elusive? There are 2 main reasons: population numbers and location. Whilst an exact figure for the number of extant wildcats is hard to assess, a current estimated population number is 95. However, such figures are arbitrary, and given the vast scale of their inhospitable territory, an inestimable number of animals would be horrendously difficult to locate, even if they were less bashful than the wildcat. In recent years, habitat loss has become an additional issue when it comes to the preservation of the wildcat. There are instances of prime woodland being cleared, ostensibly for cattle, and yet no farm animals having set foot in the cleared area. Some believe that such a loss of woodland needlessly and adversely affects the wildcat's territorial range. Sensitive forest management is to be welcomed, and indeed there is now 4 times as much forestry in Scotland today as there was 100 years ago. Forest management also espouses a wildlife-friendly ethos. For example, animal breeding seasons are respected. Each morning, the crew would rise early as they knew that the wildcat was most active at dawn and dusk. Early one chilly morning, the team discovered a thawed patch in the frost where an animal had sat, surrounded by paw prints and other indicators, including meandering trails and a possible den. The evidence suggested the wildcat had been in the area quite recently. Place names often proffered a clue. For example, the crew would rise early to lug equipment up a hill called the Cat's Back, a telltale giveaway, only to haul it all back down again after a day with no successful sightings. After many such energy-sapping treks, fatigue would take hold and the human imagination would take over. The crew decided to stay and keep watch where they had found the print in the frost. And whilst the animal did not return, they were not without a visitor. Easy to imagine a beautiful, energetic, green-eyed wildcat appearing out of nowhere, pouncing on the mouse that scurried into view. Alas, wishful thinking. The main threat to the species is interbreeding with feral and domestic cats, a process termed as hybridization. Such interbreeding has even led to the conclusion held by some that no wildcat now exists with 100% wildcat DNA. Little is known about the Scottish wildcat's early lifespan in the British Isles. Few written or documented mentions exist, and so one must turn to the vagaries of legend and fancies of folklore to gain some insight into the animal's standing in tradition. And even then, any such record may be riddled with hyperbole and embellishment. British storytelling is a synthesis of Celtic, Scandinavian, Cumbric and Northumbrian influences. And of all these influences, the Highland strongholds may well have witnessed the least impact upon an invigorating oral tradition. The cat was a powerful totem of many tribes. Indeed, the Scottish place name Caithness is named from the clan of Catty, or cat people. And in Ireland, the hero Fionn fought the Cat Heads, a warrior tribe who wore cat skin on their heads when heading into battle. So, as often as not, some deep-rooted integrity will out, and with much digging and sturdy revision, tiny essences of truth will emerge from these muscular word images and age-old capricious tales. And when they do so, a tiny bell chimes deep in our subconscious. Cat She is a character that appears in Scots, Irish, Welsh, and English traditional tales. Such slippery leftover scraps of story undoubtedly reveal a sliver of meaning and a trace of reason that enlighten us about its origins in some ancient, probably much longer story inspired by the past prevalence of Scottish wildcats. A repeated and therefore fairly dependable description of Cat She shows it to be a large black cat with a white spot in its chest. And as with all such characterizations, it was more than likely inspired by a real animal. More down to earth and much more recent is the officially documented story behind the Kellis cat of our age. This small black cat was named after the village of Kellis in Moray, where it was caught in a snare by a gamekeeper in 1984. Though not a formal breed of cat, it is a locally adapted hybrid between a domestic and wild cat. As a result of excellent care, patience and knowledge, Agish Field Centre now has 2 breeding pairs of wildcats. And appropriately, these young animals have Scottish names: Hamish and Tana, Isla and Cole. The weather is fine and conditions are ideal. The search for the Scottish wildcat continues. This area is known locally as one that the wildcat often frequents. The crew has been on the alert since early morning and the cameras are on standby. This is a waiting game. After a search period that has lasted 6 weeks, the crew has learnt more about the territories of the wildcats they are seeking. Nicknamed Lady and Angus, there are 2 animals in this particular area. Pursuing an animal that is rarely observed and even harder to detect comes with its fair share of disappointment and frustration. However, patience is not without its rewards. For example, on a shoot during a particularly gloomy day when morale was somewhat low and time seemed to crawl by, from out of some lofty nowhere, a barn owl flashes past. It was as if an archangel had descended to renew the film crew's sense of purpose and morale. The preservation of the remaining wildcats is a 2-pronged approach. Trap, Neuter, Vaccinate, Release, TNVR for short, is designed to reduce risks to any wildcats in the priority areas. Both the breeding program and TNVR system need to be working in tandem if we are to safeguard the wildcat's future. All organizations involved in the preservation of the wildcat promote responsible domestic cat ownership. And as wildcats can interbreed with both domestic and feral cats, there is a threat that such reduction of the wildcat gene pool could lead, eventually, to genetic dilution and ultimately to extinction. Public engagement of this kind is essential if a clear understanding of the plight of the wildcat is to be understood and addressed not just by professional conservationists, but also by the public at large. Whatever the fate of the Scottish wildcat, its place in Celtic mythology is forever established. Within that extravagant folklore, the cat-she is a fairy creature whose origin was most likely inspired by the wildcat. Within the realms of the oral tradition, cat-she continues to haunt the Highlands, and like so many other such mystical characters, continues to play out fictional adventures across the province of the imagination. In reality, the wildcat's future relies not just on the efforts of the many hard-working people and organizations that seek to preserve this spellbinding animal. It also lies in the hands of the public at large, and not just in Scotland, but throughout the United Kingdom, for this is a threatened British species. Much valuable scientific research and practical work is currently underway to save and preserve the Scottish wildcat. But whatever the charismatic animal's future, be it survival or extinction, its presence, whether physical or otherworldly, will continue to forever enrich the fertile narrative of the Highlands of Scotland.